Big Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Big Apple Blitz. What is going on? I am Matt O'Leary, joined as always by my good buddy, Anthony Rivardo. Anthony, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Like you just informed me, I didn't even realize today was the day, but football's officially back today. Apparently the Hall of Fame game takes place tonight, so super excited about that. Of course, Giants play their first preseason game in 1 week from today, so getting really excited. Football is here. We've had all these training camp clips and storylines to react to, but soon enough, we'll be watching the pads come on, and we'll be watching these teams face off against one another.
Absolutely, things you love to see. We wanted to start with a Giant story in Drew Lock, and we will get to that. But we had some breaking news right before we hopped on, so going to start with this one as Tarik Cohen is retiring, which came out of the blue. Adam Schefter tweeted it out this morning, as well as a bunch of other insiders. Was competing for a roster spot with the New York Jets. And honestly, I thought he was having a pretty good camp. He looked ahead of Izzy Abanikanda, who was drafted by the Jets last year. And with Cohen's, return ability and the new kickoff rules and Xavier Gipson's injury, I was like, okay, this looks like Tarik Cohen's going to make this team here. And then first day into August, calls it a career.
Yeah, this one's surprising. We were kind of discussing recently about the role that he could play on special teams. He's looked solid at camp. The kickoff format has changed a little bit. Maybe Tarik Cohen can kind of reignite a flame that he had in the previous stages of his career, but ultimately decides to call it quits. Very surprising news, and unfortunately not a big blow to the Jets anyway. I mean, listen, Tarik Cohen was back end of the roster player trying to make some sort of big, long-awaited return to the football field. But, I mean, this is not the most impactful news, but it is interesting. And it's unfortunate to see because I was rooting for Cohen to make this return from injury and hopefully have a second win in his career.
Yeah, it would have been a really big story for someone to work his way back after all those injuries. Strange. Obviously, wishing him the best. First State Jets hanging with us. He chimes in and says, weird when he said he was all the way back a day or two. Anyway, best to him, onward and upward. That's kind of, I think where we both are with this one. It's surprising. I don't think unfair to say that I was surprised by this one. But, at the end of the day, as Anthony rightfully pointed out, it was a fringe roster player, someone who had a chance to make the team. Again, would have been a really cool story, but I would imagine that the path for Xavier Gipson and maybe Malachi Corley to be back there on return seems pretty likely now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been saying all summer long that I would love to see Malachi Corley take those kickoffs. I think that he's just so well suited for this new kickoff return format. So obviously, we'll hope to see that during the preseason games upcoming. But it is unfortunate, a little bit less depth there through the preseason with Cohen now retiring. But again, like you said, wishing him the best, hoping everything is all right with him. And it's unfortunate to see him retire. But at the end of the day, the Jets do have plenty of options to fill that role.
Absolutely. So let's get back to what we were originally going to start with. And I wrote in the graphic, Drew Lock, QB1 ? Because you texted me this morning and you're like, I want to talk about Drew Lock potentially getting first team reps here. So we didn't even make it to August on the year 6 revival. Is this what I'm hearing? Unfortunately, Anthony.
All right, well, the year 6 leap is still possible, but a little bump in the road on Tuesday morning because obviously the Giants didn't have practice yesterday. They took the day off, but on Tuesday, their second padded practice in a row, their second padded practice of the summer, well, it was an ugly one. There were a lot of reports coming out that Brian Daboll was livid. He was screaming at the offense, berating them after a sloppy 11-on-11 period, went over to the sideline, screamed at them for a good few minutes. Apparently, the reporters could hear every word he was saying from 80 yards away. So Brian Daboll was pissed off, and apparently a lot of the brunt of the force that Dable was giving out was given to Daniel Jones because he finished like 5 for 14 passing on Tuesday. He had a couple of near interceptions. I don't know if he actually ended up having an interception, but a couple really ugly passes that should have been picked off. There were a few clips that went viral of him missing wide open targets. He threw this pass out to the flat to Darius Slayton that wasn't even close. He had a deep ball with a wide open Jalen Hyatt that was probably 7 yards short, ended up incomplete. Yeah, there's the viral clip of him just absolutely missing a wide open Darius Slayton about 5 yards ahead of him. And that seemed to be a trend throughout the practice. So a lot of ugly reps. Meanwhile, Drew Lock has been hitting the open targets as the QB2 with the second team. He hasn't been lighting it up. He hasn't been looking like the QB1, but he has been hitting the open targets. So now there's this discussion that's starting to begin. We'll see how Jones bounces back at practice today with no pads on, but there is a conversation that's brewing here. Should Drew Lock start to get some of those reps with the first team?
Yeah, frustrating when your quarterback at this point in his career is missing those 5. Like, that's such a gimme route. And like, that's the kind of stuff we'd see last year from Zach Wilson, and then just convince ourselves that no, it's actually okay. This happens all the time. Quarterbacks miss those routes. He's gonna be fine. There's a lot of fan coping, I think. And missing the deep shots. Unfortunately, that's not something new either. I feel like we've seen that a lot with Daniel Jones in his career. As you mentioned with Drew Lock, not the most exciting name as a backup quarterback. Same draft class as the Daniel Jones one, which I think is interesting. I know a lot of my Giant fan friends were really big on Drew Lock and they didn't want Daniel Jones. And then it ended up being, the opposite. Now Drew Lock is here and maybe could take some first team reps. The Giants have 3 quarterbacks who are in a very similar tier to each other, in my opinion, I think anyway. And you kind of get into the old Bill Parcells adage where if you have, 2 quarterbacks, or in this case, 3 quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. And you could make the pivot to Drew Lock. I guess my question is how much of an upgrade do you think that is? And do you think it makes a massive difference in the grand scheme of things if Lock does end up getting first team reps and ends up being this team starter?
So I think it makes a difference. It doesn't make an upgrade. I think it's pretty horizontal there. Like you said, all 3 of these guys are in the same tier. I'm a Tommy DeVito believer. The way that I look at it, you've got Daniel Jones going into his 6th season. You've got Drew Lock going into his 6th season. You don't expect those guys to take that major patented year 6 leap, either one of them. But Tommy DeVito, meanwhile, was an undrafted free agent last year who missed pretty much all of training camp because I don't think he was signed until late in the offseason, or at least he missed mini camp. There was something, he missed a lot of practice time. He pretty much got thrown into the fire, eventually made his way onto the roster, then got thrown into the fire once again because he had to play regular season snaps that were never expected of him. And he went out there and won 3 straight games. And he didn't look like the worst quarterback in the NFL at any point. Daniel Jones, inversely, has looked like the worst quarterback in the NFL at some points. So you look at the way that Tommy DeVito just stepped in there with 0 expectations and 0 preparedness and actually made some plays and won some games. I don't understand why the narrative isn't around him like maybe there's something to develop here. I mean, I understand where it comes from. He's undrafted. The Giants didn't invest any draft picks into him. Therefore, they don't have to make him develop. But the thing that I kept saying last season, imagine the Giants drafted a rookie quarterback in the 1st round. He stepped onto the field midway through the season, put together 3 straight wins, had the stat line that Tommy DeVito had. Giants fans would be calling him the second coming of Eli Manning and saying he's the franchise quarterback for the next 15 years. But because Tommy DeVito, an undrafted rookie free agent, did it, nobody really cared that much. It was just a fun phase, and everybody said maybe he can be a backup long-term, and that's probably the case for him. He probably will just be a backup long-term, but I think the discrediting of Tommy DeVito is a little bit ridiculous. The overcrediting of what Daniel Jones has done in his career is also ridiculous, and at the end of the day, the main reason why Daniel Jones should not be receiving all of the first-team reps is because of his injury history. The Giants need to have a quarterback ready to go in and play with some chemistry with the starting offensive players in case Jones gets injured once again. That's why Drew Lock needs to start getting some reps with the first team, because if Jones goes down, or if Jones just isn't playing well and the Giants want to avoid risking that injury clause that we've discussed so much, Drew Lock needs to have some chemistry, needs to be able to go in there and make some plays with those playmakers.
Yeah, and also, when does it get to the point where just making a change might even just be better just for the sake of making a change because of this of the guys who were here, last year, and I get it, like you had Malik Nabers who wasn't here, new running back, and like things are a little bit different with the playmakers. But for the guys who have been here, Darius Slayton, for example, like as he sees a pass sail over his head on a 5-yard out, like when does he just kind of mail it in and be like, I can't believe we're going to try this again with this guy going into a 6th year? And then we see it. Backup quarterbacks have sparked offenses. And maybe it's not a long-term fix, but coming in and giving you at least something to get excited about on the offense, I think would be an upgrade. And as you also pointed out too, like the chances of Daniel Jones being this team starter and playing all 17 games is so close to 0 because of that injury clause. And because in all likelihood, they're going to want to get out of the contract anyway, unless he just completely pops off the page in the first 8 games of the year and is playing at an MVP level, which I guess anything's possible. But the chance of that one hitting is also probably pretty slim. So you're right. Locke does have to build some chemistry, or DeVito for that case too, whichever one of those guys. But for now, at least in the Giants pecking order of things, Locke feels like he'd be the next guy up.
Agreed. And I'm always very careful not to overreact to a bad practice during training camp, right? Daniel Jones had one bad practice on Tuesday. He's been a little inconsistent on the other ones, but he really has only had this one terrible practice day. And I'm not overreacting to that and saying that he can't be the starter this year and he needs to be pulled. The main point of this is Drew Lock needs QB1 reps, not because Jones struggled, but because Jones has an injury history. That's the main point here. Jones has had so many injuries throughout his career. He's only had one fully healthy season. 2 of the injuries that he's had in his career have been season ending, and he's coming off of a torn ACL. So you know that he might be a little more susceptible to getting hit in the pocket because he might not be as mobile. So all of those factors taken together, Drew Lock needs to get first team reps. That's just how I see it. And there will be fans who debate Drew Lock is better than Daniel Jones. Absolutely. That's not even where I'm coming from with this. Take performance completely out of the equation for both of those players and just look at injury history. You have to protect yourself if you're the New York Giants. If you are Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen with your back against the wall this year, needing to get some wins to keep your jobs in 2025 and beyond, you have to protect yourself. And therefore, you have to look at your options behind Daniel Jones and give them an opportunity to compete at some point this summer.
Another good comment from First State Jet says, use the Jets as a cautionary tale when the players have no faith in the quarterback. We had guys a couple of years ago wearing Mike White t-shirts on a plane to travel to Minnesota because they were just so excited that they were able to move the ball offensively. Like, again, we can maybe go back and say whether or not that was or wasn't the right thing to do. But again, it seems like guys quit. Alan Lazard, a great example, someone who's actually been pretty good in training camp back with Aaron Rodgers. Do we think maybe he kind of just started to mail it in after, dealing with Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, and Tim Boyle? And I'm not justifying him doing that. I don't think it's a good sign that he's doing that, but it's not impossible to see the rest of the team kind of check out when your quarterback's not giving you a chance.
Yeah, and I won't even say that we've never seen that with the Giants, because I think over this past half a decade with Daniel Jones, there have been games where he's been playing so poorly and the entire offense just becomes stagnant and stale and just stops trying. So it's tough to watch that happen always, whether you're watching it happen to the Giants, the Jets. I mean, I'm even thinking back to last year. I think it was against Dallas. Darius Slayton wasn't getting the ball. Darius Slayton was consistently open in that game. Slayton had to go over to the sideline and be calmed down because he was getting into a screaming match with wide receivers coach Mike Groh, was getting into a screaming match with his teammates. He wanted the ball, and he deserved to get the ball, but the quarterback wasn't getting him the ball. And obviously Daniel Jones wasn't playing in that game. He was already injured by then, but still the point stands. You can absolutely watch tensions rise when the quarterback is not doing their job properly. And there is a concern that if Daniel Jones doesn't rise to the occasion, doesn't have the year 6 leap, will the wagons fall off? Will everything go haywire? And will that cost Brian Daboll his job? You never know. So I think it would be very smart for Daboll and his staff to give Drew Lock those first team reps just in case they need to make a change. That way the change can be as smooth as heavenly possible.
Yeah, our guy Johnny Boy says, give Tommy Cutlets the ball and let him rock. I know we're not going to have to convince Anthony on that one.
No convincing needed. I am all in on Tommy DeVito. Again, like I said, if it was a first round, even a second round, even a third round rookie draft pick that stepped in there and had that kind of success, Giants fans would look at it completely differently. I know them so well. I know how they respond to certain things. It's only because he was undrafted that they peg him as a long-term backup. But if he had any draft capital invested into him, that would have been the most impressive run of a Giants rookie quarterback since, oh man, it's been a long time.
That it has. Shout out Dano hanging with us in the chat, David D as well. Wanted to go back to Johnny's first comment here because it's a good transition spot. He says, hey guys, let's go. Corley will win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Now that's something that our guy Johnny Boy has been on for a little while here, talking about Corley winning the Offensive Rookie of the Year. Now, I don't know if I'm going that far on it, but good news is we had our first real look at what a big Malachi Corley day could look like. As yesterday, he turned in a 3-touchdown performance with the number 1 team in Aaron Rodgers. I know about a week or so ago, we were talking about him needing more reps with the first team. Well, he got him, and he had 2 receiving touchdowns and a rushing touchdown as well. Really love to see the Jets rookie getting involved like that.
Yeah, you got to love it. I mean, listen, I will have to respond to the idea of him being a potential Offensive Rookie of the Year. It's going to be tough. I mean, look across town, look at who he's facing off against, and Malik Nabers. But I'm obviously really excited for Malachi Corley. He's a player that I thought was really interesting during the pre-draft process, and to see him making plays at camp, it's not surprising. And I just want to see it continue, right? 3 touchdowns yesterday. Put up 3 more touchdowns today, Malachi. I think that what he brings to the table is so dynamic, the way that he can get involved in multiple positions and multiple facets of the receiving game. I think there's a lot of potential here for Corley. And if he continues to develop that chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, I think we could see him on the field quite a lot this season. I know that Mike Williams isn't out there right now, so that's obviously giving a lot of reps to other guys. But even when Williams returns, the playing style that Corley has is so different that he should still be able to make his way onto the field because of what he brings that's so unique to the football field.
Absolutely. And by the way, as we were talking, I figured why not pull up the Offensive Rookie of the Year odds. So BetUS has them. And Caleb Williams, number 1. Your guy Malik Nabers is up there as well at plus 1,500. If you're confident in our guy Malachi Corley winning, a little sprinkle plus 8,000 for Malachi Corley. Bet $100, win 8,000.
I guess it's not the worst bet of all time, but yeah, it's not one that you'll see me making, that's for sure.
No, I don't think so. But more of the story is, and kind of what I wanted to get into here is, again, if you're kind of just getting Corley to be a useful wide receiver, insert, 2, 3, or 4 for this Jets team in 2024, that's a really good sign. Now, we know outside of the wide receiver position, Breece Hall is going to be heavily involved in the passing attack. He was second in targets last year. I would not be surprised if we see that again. Same thing with Tyler Conklin. I think he's going to be in the top 3 of receiving targets as well for the Jets this year. And then you kind of get into the debate because Mike Williams is still making his way back, and how good is he early on in the year? But if Corley can kind of establish himself as a legitimate option coming at you in the slot right away, I think that's, again, a fantastic sign. And, again, even if he's a role player but gives you 300 to 500 receiving yards, somewhere in that range, and is, a little bit of a playmaker, I think you sign up for it in year 1.
I think you do sign up for that. And like I've always said about Corley back in the pre-draft process on Fireside Giants, I think this is a player who immediately steps in as an incredible gadget player. Does so much for you in that versatile little role. Sure, you can call them trick plays. Gadget players can be very valuable. I mean, the Chiefs have gotten tremendous value out of their gadget players over the last several years. He plays well in that running back role, that screen game role, can contribute for you on special teams. So I think that's what you envision for Corley early on. But as time goes on, he develops, he expands his route tree, he becomes more of a complete package at the receiver position, and hopefully turns into a really solid player. And I think for what it's worth, when you were kind of projecting those stats for Corley, maybe he is up there at around 550 receiving yards. He feels like a player who, to me, is going to score a lot of touchdowns based on the amount of receptions that he gets. Because I think this is a guy that you give the ball to in space in the red zone, watch him break a couple tackles, fall forward, score 6 points. So I think even if the reception total is low, like maybe he gets 30 receptions, you could see like 7 of those end up being touchdowns for Corley.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And that's what the Jets were working on yesterday. It was red zone. Rodgers had 6 passing touchdowns and more on the Jets offense coming back to life later in this episode. But for context, Zach Wilson had 8 red zone passing touchdowns on the whole season last year, and Aaron Rodgers had 6 in one practice. And I get it, practice first game situations, but just showing how the variance at quarterback play between the Jets last year and this year is pretty big. But again, 3 touchdowns in the red zone. One of them was rushing on the ground. I do think we kind of see some Deebo Samuel. Now, I don't know if it'll be 2021 Deebo where he got 8 touchdowns on the ground and another 6 through the air, but maybe it's like, I don't know, maybe like you said, 4 and 3 or 4 and 2, something like that. And then you look, it's like, hey, like Malachi Corley ended up having, around 7 touchdowns as a rookie. Like that's pretty impressive for, a gadget guy and someone who's kind of penciled in as your 3rd wide receiver option and maybe like 5th in terms of targets. So I'm about it. I think he's a useful piece, and I think the Jets just have to utilize him properly. Like if they were expecting him to come in and be like this pristine route runner, because Saleh said at the beginning of camp, like his route running is not up to snuff yet. It's like, well, it's probably never going to be. That's not his strong suit. Like just kind of get him the ball in space and let him work yards after the catch.
Yeah, I think it would be silly for the Jets to expect him to step in and be kind of like an outside wideout and playmaker like that. But I think that they understand what they're getting in him, a guy who will serve as a gadget player and a dynamic role piece in the offense for now. But as long as Nathaniel Hackett can be creative and come up with the plays for Corley, I expect a big year for him. But that is the big question mark. And that's always been the question mark for this Jets offense throughout our discussions over the course of the offseason. It's been, can Nathaniel Hackett make the most of the talent that the Jets have in their skill position players? So that's going to be the question mark. If he's able to figure out the role for Corley and get him involved, I have no doubts he's going to have a really solid rookie season, but we'll ultimately see how Nathaniel Hackett utilizes him and whether or not it's able to maximize his talent.
I like this comment from Dano. Says, love that we drafted Corley. When you look at the Chiefs camp and you see how badly Worthy is getting manhandled in Chiefs camp, and they traded up for him too. Draft man, not Darius Hayward Bays. Did you see the clip of him going up against press coverage yesterday?
I did, and that was hilarious. That looked like a scene from a cartoon.
It's rough, and I always have a little bit of concern with those wide receivers who are at the top of the charts in their 40 time, running the low 4.2s, and so they almost never pan out. So I always think that's a little bit, the 40 times are a touch on the overrated, but he's he's listed as 5'11", 172. The 172 might be a little bit generous also. I don't know if that's a true 172 pounds. If you touch him at the line of scrimmage, he's going to go flying. So both very different kinds of wide receivers, as obviously with the physicality of Corley, he's not going to really have to worry about going up against press.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that with Corley because he's just so dynamic in so many other ways. With Xavier Worthy, that clip's super concerning, but it's also not shocking. He's probably 165 pounds, 5'11". It's why he was able to run such a fast 40-yard dash time. He's built like a track athlete, not necessarily an NFL player. And then you can have concerns about, well, if he adds that NFL weight, will he still be that fast and dynamic? That's the question mark that the Chiefs have to figure out. But meanwhile, their gadget player in Xavier Worthy versus the Jets gadget player in Malachi Corley, completely different flavors of football. One of them blow by you with speed. The other one punch you in the mouth with power. That's what you love from Malachi Corley. Just turn on the film, turn on the highlights, whatever. Watch him take a screen pass, run over 3 guys, break 3 more tackles, and score touchdowns. It's going to be a lot of fun watching Corley play in the big leagues.
Yeah, I can't wait for it. So just wanted to shout out his productive day from yesterday. Johnny Boy has a question, a little bit off topic, but we'll go back to what we started in the beginning with Cohen retiring. What does that say about the place of Gibson and Izzy, who were on their way to being cut? ? Yeah, I think that's fantastic news for Izzy Abanikanda, because as I mentioned at the top of the show, I don't know if he would have ended up making the roster because I thought Cohen actually looked pretty good in camp. Gibson, I think, was going to make it regardless. But that probably opens the door now for Izzy and someone we just talked about, Malachi Corley, having a little bit of a role here on special teams with no more Tarik Cohen in the mix there.
Yeah, I think that opens things up for some of those other guys, like you mentioned, Izzy Abanikanda. I think he's a major benefactor of this retirement. But I do think that those RB 3, 4, 5 spots really get determined by who contributes best on special teams. And again, because you have a dynamic player like Corley, who probably isn't lining up in the backfield, I do think that some of the reps he might take away from those running backs in the receiving game as a screen receiver and gadget player could actually hurt them just as badly as Tarik Cohen's potential solid performances throughout the summer would have. So I think it's going to be tough. It's an uphill climb for some of those back end of the roster running backs for the Jets. They just have a lot of dynamic skill position players who can contribute both on special teams and as receivers that are like an extension of the running game.
Anthony, another day, another Malik Nabers clip making the rounds. I'll start this over from the beginning here, but that will just an unbelievable catch from the Giants rookie wide receiver. How excited are you for Malik Nabers on this Giants football team?
The Giants haven't had a playmaker like this since Odell Beckham Jr. OBJ is one of my favorite New York Giants players of all time. The wide receiver position is my favorite position in football. I believe it's a true art to play in the wide receiver position. And when you really watch it and study it, it's so fun. Like seeing the way that these players kind of play chess mentally and with the way that they set up their route stems and break open. And Nabers is so good at all of that. And he's been absolutely lighting it up. There's one thing that I'm excited for with the New York Giants this season. It's just to watch this rookie get on the football field and make some plays. And I got a highlight there on that clip that you just showed, though. Tons of separation on Cordell Flott, who I'm not super excited about as he's competing for CB2, but really excited. That was like 7 yards of separation. For a while, he was the only one in frame on that clip, but he still had to slow down to make the grab, had to make an incredible falling, leaping touchdown grab there.
Who threw that?
It had to be Daniel Jones because Nabers and Flott are both first team players. So
I was trying to see from the video. It was tough to make out who that ball was coming from. But
everybody on the field there is a starter in that clip, so have to assume that it's Daniel Jones. But probably nitpicking with that one. But when you have that much separation, it's not ideal to make a leaping spectacular grab.
Yeah, you didn't need to do the back shoulder throw there at that point. But like in some instances at that spot, yes, if it's tight coverage, the back shoulder throw. So I won't kill him on that one. But he was wide open, man. He's going to be a special talent. I'm very excited to watch from, this show's perspective and doing this twice a week. I can't wait to just watch this kid on the football field every Sunday.
Oh, me too. It's going to be a lot of fun. And on topic, off topic for Malik Nabers, I just pulled off a blockbuster trade yesterday in my dynasty fantasy football league.
Okay, let's hear it.
So it's a 20-man league with individual players. It's insane. It's huge. It's like an NFL sim. It's crazy. But I was holding pick 16. I traded Mike Evans, pick 16, second round, 16th overall pick as well, and Aaron Rodgers to move from 16 all the way up to pick number 3 so I can grab Malik Nabers. Draft is on Sunday. Hopefully I get him.
Wow. Yes. Fingers crossed. Good luck with that. I am very curious to hear how that roster ends up shaking out. 20-man league, those are some deep rosters, my friend.
Yes. At a certain point, you just start picking up backups to backups, and you're like, hopefully at some point they get on the field due to injuries.
Love that. Let's talk. You mentioned Flott. You're not very high on, but another Giants cornerback has been standing out. The Giants rookie corner. Let's get into that.
Yeah, so Flott was the starter, basically rotational starter in the slot last year and the year prior. This year, moving out wide to the boundary, playing cornerback there. And in the meantime, Andrew Phillips is pretty much just being thrust into that starting nickel cornerback job. If you watched Hard Knocks the other night, there was conversation in the draft room about Andrew Phillips. Joe Shane said this would be the last cornerback on the draft board that they would really get kind of excited by. And then he turned to the defensive coaches and asked them, is this a 3-down nickel cornerback for you? And they said, yeah, we could play him all 3 downs. He could play a starting level of snaps, which I thought was interesting because it kind of indicated to me that the Giants maybe are going to use nickel personnel as their base defense this year, rather than a 3-4 or 4-3. I think they're going to be playing with 5 defensive backs more often than not. That's going to be huge for Andrew Phillips, and he's already looking like a stud. He has stood out every day of practice, against the run, against the pass. He's physical. He's been making plays. So I am feeling a lot more excited about the Giants' nickel cornerback situation. Still very concerned about CB2 on the boundary, but in the slot, feeling really good about Andrew Phillips.
Yeah, that was a really nice, I think a really nice find. And I know he hasn't played a regular season game yet, but this was a player that I liked in the draft and think it was good value that the Giants got. Yeah, and you mentioned the Hard Knocks. It was obviously the draft episode, and that was the last one of the series. I really loved the series. I thought we got a good behind the scenes look from the draft in this last one. And you heard, as you pointed out, Joe Shane and the staff, they really, really like this kid. And that was about it. It was after this, there wasn't really anybody else that jumped out. So glad that they got their guy, and getting someone at that point in the draft who's likely going to be a starter for you on this defense, I think is a good sign.
Absolutely. I'm totally in agreement with that one. And I think that the physicality that he brings to the lineup is pretty important, especially when comparing and contrasting his game to that of Cordell Flott's. Flott is a very wiry, skinny, 6'1" frame. I think he's under 180 pounds himself. So you have a lot of concerns about his physicality in the running game and his durability, but you don't have those concerns with Phillips. So the Giants still need to iron out who's going to be the starting number 2 cornerback. I'm gunning for Nick McLeod, as I have been all off season long. But right now, we feel really comfortable with what we have in the slot, and that's a great thing, because that almost feels like this rookie has already won this job so early on in training camp, and we don't have to worry about that one going forward. So we have all these different moving parts in the defensive backfield, position battle at free safety now, position battle at CB2. But for this rookie to pretty much have this slot cornerback job locked up this early is at least how it feels. That's good. It gives you some stability going through the rest of training camp and into the preseason.
Absolutely. And you pointed out too the Giants likely having their 3 corners out there and 5 DBs. Do you think they're going to play more of a 4 defensive lineman front or 3 D linemen? Because I know that in the past system with Wink Martindale was the 3-4 more often, and that's how you ended up with guys like Kayvon Thibodeau having to be out in coverage at some points.
I think what we're going to see is a 4-2-5 defense, meaning I think we get Dexter Lawrence obviously on the defensive line. The other 3, one of them is going to be a random young defensive lineman who gets into the middle. And then the 2 edge rushers and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden are the 2, and then the 5 defensive backs. So I think we see 4 up front, not in the sense of a 4-3 defensive line, but the 4-2-5 nickel base package, I think, is what they're going to be leaning towards.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. The Jets run a lot of that too, the 4-2-5 with Michael Carter in the slot, and I think it makes sense for the Giants personnel. I know that Bowen kind of mixed it up a little bit from my understanding of how he ran his defenses. It's not like he was always, running out the 3-4 or the 4-3. Kind of it depended on the personnel, but from a personnel perspective, I think that makes the most sense for this Giants football team running a 4-2-5 and getting your guy in Phillips out there on the field, who again is for where they drafted him, for him to be able to come in and start for this Giants team is a really good sign. And the Giants defense, like they needed bodies and they needed starters. So especially in the cornerback room though, but CB2, man, still up in the air, it feels like.
Definitely still up in the air, but Nick McLeod just keeps making plays, and I've been saying his name for so long. I'm happy to see it, and I'm hoping that he takes that starting job. I've never been a big fan of Cordell Flott. I wasn't crazy about the selection when they made it back in 2022. I saw the traits, I saw the potential, but at the end of the day, I thought that his size was always going to hold him back, and so far it has. Meanwhile, Nick McLeod, if you look back at the film last year against the Eagles and A.J. Brown, he was up in his face. He was physical in press coverage, and he was showing strength at the point of attack. I like McLeod. I think that he has a really good flair about him on the football field. I'm thinking he's going to win that CB2 job, but it is a long summer, and the Giants have been adding back end of the roster cornerbacks for depth. They signed someone yesterday, Mario Goodrich, I think his name was. He claimed them off of waivers. He was with the Eagles for the last couple of years. He won't make the roster at the end of the season or at the end of the summer, but they are looking at cornerback talent, I think is notable in that regard. And so while I feel good about McLeod taking over that position, there is a chance that by the end of the summer, they end up signing a free agent or they end up claiming someone off of waivers once cut day happens in September.
Couple Giants questions from the chat. Our guy Johnny Boy has been on this for a while. I know you agree. And super low key Giants wide receiver core is pretty nice, super under the radar. I know you agree with that on the Giants depth.
Completely agreed. I think it's one of the best receiving cores in football. It's very low key, like you said, but when you look at it, you've got Nabers, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton. Those are 4 guys who start on pretty much every football team, and their 5th guy, Isaiah Hodgins, starts on probably half of the football teams in the league, and their 6th guy, Allen Robinson, also probably starts on all the football teams. So they have like 6 starting caliber wide receivers. Maybe they don't have all that top-end talent. They don't have a Jamar Chase and T. Higgins pairing, but in terms of the depth and solid, reliable starting talent that they have, it's among the best in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at how deep how their wide receiver 3 or 4 stacks up versus other teams 3 and 4 is going to be very high. Like, as you said, like it's not Devonta Smith and AJ Brown or T. Higgins and the Jamar Chase pairing that you mentioned, but really nice unit. I agree. Dano's got a dynasty question for you. Nabers, Odunze, or Bowers. Tight ends get a PPR, but wide receivers do not. And I have Cole Kmet already. What's your take? I honestly, hand up, I've never played in a dynasty league. I only do regular leagues.
Yeah, Dynasty League is overwhelming. It's scary, but it's a lot of fun. You feel like every decision is going to impact you forever. But with tight ends getting PPR in this league, but not wide receivers, I almost want to lean towards Bowers, but at the end of the day, I think Malik Nabers is the most talented of the bunch, and everything that he's shown in training camp backs that up. I mean, at the end of the day, when we're talking about Malik Nabers, this is the guy who holds the record for most career receiving yards at LSU, and that's LSU, where Jamar Chase, Odell, Justin Jefferson, Jarvis Landry, all of these guys had prolific careers. Malik Nabers is the real deal. He's a historically good player. I'm taking him every chance that I get in dynasty leagues. I think he's going to be a superstar for years to come. So even though he doesn't get the PPR, I don't think he needs it because he's going to put up a lot of touchdowns and a lot of receiving yards every single season.
Also, it's Dano's first time. He says, I'm going to pee myself. I could understand that it's overwhelming. That's probably why I haven't jumped on the bandwagon yet. But I could see how it would be fun because, as you said, kind of feel a little bit more like a GM. Your decisions last more than just one season.
Yeah, that's how I felt last year. It was my first time entering that 20-man league as my first dynasty league. Was very crazy, very overwhelming. But because that's so huge, it really does feel like an NFL sim. And things didn't go as planned for me in the draft, but I ended up pivoting to plan B, and I scored more points than anybody last year. Just somehow got unlucky and lost in the postseason, but looking to run it back and win the chip this year.
Tony spent a month in Greece. Welcome back, Tony. Says, miss Jets football, and then asks, Matt, are you worried about Reddick yet? It's rising. I'm not saying that I'm worried because at the end of the day, I do think that he needs to play this year. I don't think he can afford to sit out his age 30 season. So I think the Jets and Reddick eventually do get something done. And my stance on it's been pretty consistent. Either, rework it for this year and get him some incentives and some more guaranteed money, or tack on the additional year. At that point, I don't really want to get into having to pay him into 2026 when you got to be getting guys like Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson, all those guys on new deals.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with you. I've been kind of saying all offseason long, I think with Reddick, extending him is not the move. I think you just want to try and give him more money this year up front and give him some incentives, but I'm not overly concerned. He'll get on the football field eventually, and he is a proven veteran. He's probably doing a lot of this just because he wants to skip training camp. A lot of the veteran players around the NFL, once they've established themselves, they always come up with an excuse, and they find a way to skip camp because they simply just don't want to do it, and they don't have to because they're going to be good anyway. So I'm not concerned about Reddick. I think he'll be just fine.
I'm with you. Anything else on Drew Phillips and the Giants before we get into our last Jets topic here?
Excited to see him work. And I also think probably in the next episode, we'll have a conversation about the free safety spot. It sounds like it's going to be a position battle now between Tyler Nubin and Dane Belton. So excited to preview that next week.
There we go. So let's get back to the New York Jets, close out the show with an offensive breakout yesterday. So with no pads, it felt like the offense was winning the day over the defense in the first couple practices. Then they put pads on, and the offense starts getting a little bit sloppy. Joe Tippmann forgets how to snap the football. The defensive line's getting a lot of pressure, and they just looked out of sync. That is until yesterday, where Rodgers threw 6 touchdowns. They had a massive day in the red zone. The Garrett Wilson, Aaron Rodgers connection was going well. We talked about Malachi Corley. Breece Hall was a major factor in the passing attack. And, just exciting stuff that the offense is beginning to catch up with the defense, because it's not crazy uncommon to see, once the pads go on, the defense a little bit ahead of where the offense usually is.
Yeah, I think that's pretty typical. Happened to the Giants as well. That also probably has something to do with the fact that the Giants have struggles at quarterback. But it is very common to see, once the pads come on, the defense takes an immediate advantage and starts playing well. But you always get excited to watch the offense catch up and start making some plays. And yesterday, like you said, with all those touchdown passes that Aaron Rodgers was throwing and the way that they kind of dominated the red zone portion of the drills, what's not to be excited about, right? I think there's so much excitement to be had with this Jets offense. And I think that the longer the summer goes on and the more that they figure out who's playing where and the more pieces that they get back, a la Mike Williams eventually returning from injury, I think there is just plenty of potential for a further breakout from this offense as the summer wears on.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, obviously the Jets have the top end talent with Garrett Wilson in the wide receiver room, and then there's, especially with no Mike Williams, there's a drop off right now. But what I've liked that we've seen in training camp is, yes, we do get him honing in on Garrett Wilson a lot, which makes sense. That's your number one receiver, and he's going to eat targets this year. But they've kind of spread the ball around beyond that. It's not going to be like, I don't know. For example, the 2015 Jets, the entire offense was Eric Decker and Brandon Marshall. They basically didn't throw to anybody else. That's not really the case. It's going to be, I think we'll see a lot to the running backs. We'll see a lot to Tyler Conklin and hopefully Jeremy Ruckert more involved this year. And then there's like another 3 or 4 receivers who are all going to split targets, and, being able to be that unpredictable, I think, is going to make life a little bit harder for these opposing defenses, and Rodgers' life a little bit easier. We know he knows how to distribute the football, and he's got a litany of wide receivers and running backs and tight ends that he could get the ball to.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of depth in this Jets offense. There is the top end talent, like you mentioned, and there is the depth, which makes things extra exciting. And again, Mike Williams still isn't back. And one of the things that we were saying before the Jets even signed Mike Williams, we were like, they should go rush to do this because his playing style is perfect for Aaron Rodgers. The way that Rodgers likes to throw, the back shoulder fade that he has mastered the art of. Well, Mike Williams is one of the best back shoulder fade receivers in the league when he's healthy. So we're talking about an offense that's looking good here, has talent here, doesn't even have all of their starters on the field. Once Williams comes back, I think they're going to be even more dynamic and create even more downfield shot plays. So really excited for Aaron Rodgers' return. Unfortunately, like I said, I did trade him away in that dynasty league, but I had to do it to get Malik Nabers, a sacrifice I was willing to make. But I do envision Rodgers having the big bounce back year that we're all hoping for.
Yeah, and like, again, I know it's only training camp and it's only practice, but it feels like this has been such a long awaited return for Aaron Rodgers. We were all excited last offseason about the addition, and then it only goes 4 plays, and then you got to wait another year for him to come back. But again, kind of like we talked about at the top of the show, the upgrade of going from anywhere from quarterback 35 to 50, depending on the week, up to, I don't know, where do you want to put Aaron Rodgers? Quarterback 10, maybe, in the NFL, is going to be really something big for this team that is with a defense as good as it has the last 2 years. I was looking it up. Over the last 2 years, the Jets have lost 8 games where their defense has allowed 20 points or less. That's like, that's not going to happen with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. So some of the frustrating losses is going away is something that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, that's definitely something to be excited about. And I think, when you think about quarterbacks over the last 20 years who've had the ability to pull their teams out of holes, make clutch plays, and make sure that the offense is never the reason why they lose, obviously Aaron Rodgers comes to mind. So the Jets offense has been the reason for a lot of their losses over recent years. I don't necessarily think that that's going to be the case this season. And I know we have our question marks about the coaching staff and Nathaniel Hackett and all of that, but as long as Rodgers is healthy, man, you have to be confident in this team and their ability to overcome all of the challenges that they're going to face on the offensive side of the ball. So think it's going to be a lot of fun. And again, I really am getting excited about this playmaker group. I think they have some special talent in there. Garrett Wilson, really thrilled for Malachi Corley as the young rookie and everything else in between. I think it's just going to be a really fun unit to watch this year.
Really good question here from Scott. He says, what does CJ Mosley need to make it into the Ring of Honor? And that might sound a little crazy when you think of how his Jets tenure started. He gets this big money contract going into 2019. He plays in one game, gets hurt against the Bills, but was the best player on the field that game, was absolutely unbelievable. Sits out in 2020 and then comes back and, is a second team all pro guy in 2022 and just a really solid leader on this team. And this is going to be his 5th season now with the Jets. If they win a ring, I think you can make that conversation for, the leader of this defense. Yes, there's, maybe some more talent with Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams, and Quincy Williams is probably even a better linebacker at this point in his career than CJ Mosley, but Mosley's leadership and football IQ, I think, is just massive for this defense overall.
Yeah, I think that the answer to the question is just to win more, right? CJ Mosley definitely establishing himself as one of the better Jets players over the last several decades and one of the best leaders that the team has had in a very long time. But in order to make it into the Ring of Honor and establish yourself as a legend for the team, I just think you have to win some games. And the Jets being on this postseason drought, it's been a very long time since they've been able to call themselves a relevant contender. This year, they are definitely contenders. At least it appears that way. But they got to live up to those expectations. They have to win football games. And then once they start doing that, I think the conversations about putting players into the Ring of Honor and looking at them as all-time franchise greats becomes a little bit more realistic.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. The last Jets to get inducted are from like that 2009-2010 era. You got like Nick Mangold and DeBrickashaw Ferguson, Darrelle Revis, guys like that. Unfortunately, when you're on a 14-year playoff drought, it's very difficult to put names up top in the rafters, unless they're just doing absolutely incredible special things. But yeah, winning more is a great answer for it, and hopefully this is the year for it, because I think Jet fans have waited long enough. They deserve to get back into the playoffs. Yeah,
you could say that again. That's without a doubt. I think it's been long enough for the Jets. And listen, Aaron Rodgers fully healthy. This was the expectation last year, was this would be the year for their return to the postseason, but hopefully this year it goes according to plan and we finally get to see some New York postseason football.
That would be a lot of fun. Before we get out of here, Anthony, any final predictions for the rest of this week here, training camp wise, before we talk again on Monday?
Yeah, I think the Giants are going to have some joint practices with the Lions next week. I'm looking forward to that. But overall, keeping a close eye on these playmakers. They've all been getting open. What does that mean for CB2 is going to be the big question mark. And again, I think we're going to get a position battle here at free safety between Tyler Nubin and Dane Belton. So really looking forward to all of the storylines coming out of Giants camp.
Absolutely. And for the Jets side of things, I know that they are expecting a huge crowd on Saturday. I was at training camp on Tuesday. Ton of fun. I got able to meet some players too. Talk to Antonio Cromartie, who's coaching now with the Jets. Tyler Conklin, Thomas Morstead, Quantez Stiggers, the rookie, was really funny. Great personality. But I was also talking to one of the security guards, and they were saying they expect like 5,000 people to show up on Saturday, which just sounds like an insane number for training camp. So we'll see how they perform under the bright lights and a big stage there. So we'll have you covered with all that on Monday. Looking forward to it. And football's back today. We got a game.
Football is back. Let's go.
Love it. That's going to do it for us. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new here. We appreciate your support. Anthony's over on Fireside Giants for his Giants coverage. Me, Matt O'Leary, NY, or Talking Jets. Be sure to follow along. I'm Matt. He's Anthony, and we'll catch you next time.